So really, if you start looking at what we're calling the digital operations optimization world, what we really need to start looking at as systems that are built from the ground up to be intelligent and extensible and and adaptive. If you start looking at the where it should be. So I think COVID and where we are right now is really a great example of how systems really need to be able to almost turn on a dime, because when your business changes, you could be really focused on growing a sales organization. Well, that sales organization is, your sales organization does its job and really starts expanding your production lines. So if your business, where you can be focused in your CRM side of the world, but if you aren't able to quickly scale your, your MMS, your warehouse management, your production pipeline systems, then it doesn't do any good, because you have a sales organization that's knocking it out of the park, but you can't get into and scale and be adapted towards the other things to allow the success that scale that the sales organization to be able to turn into real revenue. Scalable is also a fact. So scalable has been referred to, as when we start talking in the digital world, to go from 1 to 1 million transactions. Well, in the COVID world, that also means to be able to scale the systems down. You don't want to pay for any services that you're not using. A lot of the traditional ERP models are based on the number of users or transactions. And when you get into those contracts, once you get into a minimum with Oracle, getting out of that minimum is almost impossible. But that's kind of the old way of thinking, and being able to get into new models and new contracts and new systems where you can easily scale up and down is more critical now than ever. Accessibility is also, it's again, going to Philip's point, some of us did start on the green screens, and you had a terminal that could sit on a desk, and that's where you had to go do the work on it. That's not today. It is, accessibility means that, especially CFOs, that if you aren't getting the data where you are on the devices that you have, and being able to get that data to every person depending on where they are, that they can be actionable and accessible regardless of the situation, regardless of where they are. It just doesn't work in this day and age. Whether it's just forced by remote computing, getting your key people in front of the customers, in front of the problems wherever they are globally, is now more important than ever. We are going to be back in the office. We are going to be traveling again. We are going to be spreading out our organization. So having those systems accessible and not on terminals and not just on a web browser that it has to be accessed in an office, those days are over. If your ERP systems or your core systems can't do that, they're not doing your business service. And then lastly, AI about 3 years ago was a myth. It was kind of a unicorn. There were some companies that were saying that they were doing it. And kind of there was, even on that side of it, there was a lot of skepticism. That's not the case. Really, over the last couple of years, every business right now has an opportunity to use AI. The smallest business, $10 million. So one of the things that we go through when we start working with the non-CI, your CEOs and your CFOs, we start talking about technology, not from vendors, not from the TLAs, from all of the different data points, but really where we want to start is really understanding where your value stream is either inefficient for some of your key business capabilities, or it can use improvement, or we can even go through, if we're in the right business, that we'll have some of these that are green. As CFOs, these should be familiar. This is your lingua franca, if you will. This is how you talk about your business. It is your major processes and then the business capabilities below each one of them. These are either working well for your businesses. These are areas of improvement. These are direct events or functions that lead to bottom line, that lead to productivity improvements. And when we start talking about these with your non-tech groups, what this does is we are having a much bigger conversation about your business improvements. And then, if you go through and you say, guys, I'm having some really issues with cash to order. This is not my cash to order on my bottom line is not where it needs to be in our organization. The next conversation is that we start looking and we start going back to those individual building blocks, if you will, and we say, we can go through and saying, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, can we take and implement one of these building blocks? Supply chain management system, part of a supply chain management system, a warehouse system, maybe part of the CRM, to improve these individual functions. The ERP system comes in, and when you do an ERP, they want to boil the ocean. They say, we're going to affect all of these directly. You give us a 7-8 figure budget, a 24, 36 month implementation period. All of these will be green. Yes, they would all be green, but your business and your customers and the world has advanced 36 months from when you originally did your RFP. So, there's a definite gap there. And our strategy is, let's go through and look at what is important on this list. What do you want to tackle? Where you have your deficiencies? Where are you really need to focus on your business today? Where you want to focus on your business tomorrow? And as we start implementing each one of these the individual building blocks, we come back. Did we meet your expectations? Are you seeing a result in the bottom line? Good. Now, where do you want to go and make your investment? And so we really look at doing this, being able to start with this value stream is we're doing technology improvements. We're looking at it more like surgery with a scalpel rather than the large monolithic ERP systems, which is surgery with a chainsaw. Next slide, please. So I want to kind of talk about how we look at these, going back to if we were trying to figure out a good way to overlay our rocket ship slide showing all of the puzzle pieces interlocking together, how they kind of move in the areas of business that you have. So you have, your products, design, quality, safety, product information managers, and R&D. Those are all very different functions, and those are very different puzzle pieces, if you will, different systems that can fit together in a granular level. Some companies need all 4 of them. Very few do that we come across. And so when we can go through and implement the right piece, and only the right piece, it makes, to address the products issue, that's a great way to be able to approach it. I really want to go through, we have products, finance, people, supply chain, customers. It's a standard thing. But really on the HR side of it is where we're seeing a lot of these really kind of minuscule, really point solutions around dealing with HRIS issues. Where you'd have Workday that kind of is an all-in-one, very good tool. Love Workday. It is also incredibly expensive. But if you start looking at some of the other the point solutions, companies like 15Five is a great example that allows you to do, especially in a remote workforce environment where you don't have to make the solution, but you can set up 15Five, if you're not familiar with it, does a great job at going ahead and doing one-on-ones, allowing you to do remote one-on-ones, allowing you to measure and mentor users to do real 360 views of your workforce. And it is an isolated solution, and a lot of companies will use something like that to be able to go through and solve what is a very large organizational challenge, especially in remote workforce, without having to make the huge monolithic investment in a Workday or a large solution. In finance terms, if you start looking at the accounting side of it, I think that for those in Southern California, a great point solution when you start talking about getting into automation is look at the success of Blackline. Great solution that is going through and being able to do a lot of automation on systems. And the major vendors, if you start looking at your Oracles, your SAPs, they are just there's no way that they can catch up with the advantage because of what Blackline was focused on.